we oftentimes hear phrases like exercising our rights or exercising our authority. In fact, if you go on to Google, which I did, and you start typing exercising our, one of the very first things will pop up in the box before you even finish typing is faith. Exercising our faith. So it's not some term that just a few people use. It's so common, the computer assumes that's what you're going to ask it about. Exercising, and we're not talking a religious site, we're talking Google. How much more secular does it get than Google? But yet, one of the first things it talks about is exercising our faith. So we realize that that's a real term, that's a real idea. It's not just something that a pastor or a teacher has come up with. Well, let me take the term in how we normally use it. How do you exercise your rights, or your brain, or your authority, or your body? How do you exercise it? You use it. How often? Lots, right? Weekly, several times a week, daily, several times a day, depending on what it is. I've seen some of you in the gym 3-4 times a week. I'm sure most of you use your brain every day, probably several times a day, right? I see young people at the high school trying to exercise their rights, even rights they don't have, they try to exercise, don't they? We use these things often. We exercise them. So, how do I exercise my faith then? Let me ask you a question first. So is believing in Jesus enough? This is where the rubber hits the road, and this is where people get uncomfortable. And I'm going to drive right through the uncomfortable and take it to your front door. Proverbs 16:25 says, "There is a way which seems right to a man, but in the end is the way to death." What are we hearing there? That it can seem right, it can feel right, it can look right to a man, but when it's all said and done, when we go up to see Jesus Christ, what's going to happen? I never knew the man. It seems right. I believed in you, right? So we realize by that verse in Proverbs that faith is not only knowing Jesus, but Jesus knowing us.